To find out more, go to tntradio.live.
Now I want to say this, and I'm going to say it just once.
This is today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
You guessed it. It's Terry Tuesday, our man in Manitoba, Terry Wolf of wolfpox.com. Check out his website. He's got a bunch of books, been seen by millions on TikTok and his Substack as well, which we'll be discussing. I keep forgetting the link, winterchristian.substack.com. How you doing, Terry?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for having me back on. Yeah, I did in fact write some new Substack articles. I'm quite happy with this last one. I got a lot of comments on it. It's actually getting a lot of discussion. I think it's because it's tapping into what a lot of people are feeling, which is, what do we do when, the stuff hits the fan? Where do we go? How do we survive? It's a very common topic on your show, and I hear people talking about it. My Substack article is called Nowhere to Go, Nothing to Hide. It's part of a series of articles I've done called Winter Christian. It's the name of the Substack. And I'm kind of getting down to the philosophy I have on exactly this kind of question, because I'm fascinated by the psychology of the end game. How do they manipulate us into certain strategies as things start to fall apart? Because past a certain point, people don't think logically anymore. It's just panic. It's paranoia. And then, but the social engineers, if there is this conspiracy of depopulation, they have a plan. They understand the psychology of what people do in a crisis, because they've been overthrowing governments and killing people around the world for so long. The CIA has an actual handbook on how people react under crisis situations, right? So in this article, I talk about paranoid projection, which is where, if you're basically, and I say it's subconscious, if you're subconsciously planning or hoping to do something evil, you become paranoid about that plan failing. And I use as an example that story we talked about last week about the Kentucky Haven, with the far right by The Guardian, which was talking about these people wanting to have this plot of land in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee and be able to hide out there. And they're talking about it as if it's like a criminal gang that they've caught. And I'm saying, look, they're calling it a haven. They're also comparing it to the American Redoubt, which was in 2016 when Trump was, running for office. And it's like, these are hideaways. These are shelters, essentially, by all accounts. And what is it that makes them so afraid of people having a shelter? That's a very strange psychological thing. If it, like I say in the article, if it was a Hindu shelter or if it was an atheist shelter, would people be freaking out about it and saying this is some sort of, headline worthy, like scare story? Like, I think it has to do with the subconscious fear of Christians wanting to defend themselves if there's a collapse, and if there's something, if you have plans to destroy Christians, then when you see them preparing for that scenario, you start to get paranoid, and it goes on from there about how to think about, as Christians especially, how to hide and protect yourself. So I got a lot of comments on it because people are thinking about this. Some people are already homeless, and trying to figure out how to shelter themselves. And it's horrible to think about people trying to take care of their family in these situations, especially. But I want to explore the psychology of that before the collapse happens and see if I can give people some encouragement.
Yeah, and just before continuing, I came across, there's a video I shared recently, a clip where the guy was explaining that an uninformed majority will always lose a battle of information against an informed minority. So, and I think that's true. That's why I think the elite can do what they're doing. They are the informed minority, We are the uninformed majority, and they've got, as you sort of alluded to, they've got their strategic plans. They've got the resources to carry them out. And what also came to mind for me was the siege of Masada, the first Jewish-Roman war, which took place around 70. It's funny, Wikipedia says Common Era. Um, uh, okay, 73 years after what? The birth of Jesus. So, but I actually stood. And when I visited Israel, I stood there. It's quite a wondrous place to be, and that's where the Israelites, as they're as Israel was being destroyed, they fled. That was their last stand, on this big like mountain range, to hide away from the Romans. And as you depict, I think this is an important topic for me. I over the decades have switched from the gut instinct is bunker mentality, right? Get a bunker, guns, all that stuff. But now I've transitioned kind of to what you're talking about here, where you say, let's face it, there's no place to hide in the coming collapse, especially if it's prophecy. I've got nothing against people trying to optimize their last days. I love farms. But don't you think clustering into an obscure little village would just make it easier for FBI agents to round you all up? And not even related to this. Over the weekend, I was with a friend here in Mexico who lives in the kind of ruralish area of Mexico in the forest, and they were saying, I mean, look, with the technology, they can find him, they can find any of us. And what did I think there are times that you do have to cut and run, but I don't think we should live our whole lives like that. I've always had the mentality where like I'm ready for the gulag. Like our Pastor Artur Pawlowski, when you watch videos of him, he makes his body limp and then they got to carry him off. I'm like, I'm already there like 20 years ago. I'm just ready for the cops to come and take me away for doing nothing, right? It's persecution that we're talking about. And so, yeah, your further thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a line that I really like from the Bible, which is the wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous are bold as a lion. That's from Proverbs. And I think it's an insight into that's an ancient observation. That's like a 3,000-year-old observation somebody made. And it's still true now, that people who are planning to do evil are paranoid. And there's a common saying, like, if you have nothing to hide, that's an argument people make against privacy concerns. I'm all about privacy and I love that, people have rights, but you have to also think the other way. Why are other people terrified of a peaceful Christian community wanting to get away from cities and have their own little place? It's probably because they're planning something evil. And so they're paranoid, even if you're not. And so there's a strange game happening in there. And I suggest people read it if they want to also find out some curiosities about the group that was doing this haven called New Founding. I thought there were some weird coincidences there related to the movie The Purge from 2013. It's just sort of an interesting coincidence that they're called the New Founding. So, and it ties in with Trump's idea of freedom cities, which he's planning on doing if he gets elected again.
Yeah, and just to add, read the last part of your Substack, you say it'll be better to stay in your existing town, allow them to arrest you on false charges. Jesus did not tell us to flee and hide, but said it would be a time to serve as witnesses. We have nowhere to go and nothing to hide. Evil will come for us. We will be unable to stop it. And again, I would just add a caveat. It depends on the situation. But I think in general, you hit the nail on the head. You say the world wants us to run. They want us paranoid. It proves them right. And I think, like you say, we have to have this attitude of, no, this is what I believe in. I'm right here. Come, take me if you're gonna arrest me. If not, let me go on my way. And so, all right, we're gonna jump real quick to our headlines.
We're ready. We're ready.
The news is our business, and we never close. Never close.
TNT Radio News.
For TNT, this is James O'Neill. President Joe Biden has made a decision regarding how the United States will respond to the recent attack by Iran-backed militants that resulted in the deaths of 3 American soldiers. Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar, a member of the Democratic Squad, is facing sharp criticism, and calls for a resignation following a video clip that surfaced online indicating her prioritization of Somalia over American interests.
On air and on the app.
I listen on the app.
Stay up to date around the clock.
I listen, therefore I know. Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
We're back with Terry Wolf, wolfpox.com. Just trying to think, just to add one more thing, and if you have any other final thought on your Substack, which talks about, maybe we don't have to run, because I'm coming across a lot of people at the Greater Reset. I'm going to Acapulco. People are just fleeing, moving around the world. Like I said, there are times when you should do that, but even myself here, I live in narco territory in Mexico. I don't know if it's a self-defense mechanism, but there's no way that I could be living. I've been here for a decade. Imagine living your whole life freaking out. If you're going to have to run, like there's no way to live. You're just going to go nuts. The stress is going to kill you. And so I've just come to terms with it. If tomorrow, someone comes to take me away, so be it. And because I've got my basic instructions before leaving Earth, as they say. Jesus is my parachute, and so there's nothing else that can be done to me. But any final thought on that before maybe moving on to the topic of Texas, which is also related to this idea of fleeing and whatnot?
Yes, it is. But I would say that for me, it's more like, what's the alternative? If you know that a threat is coming, your mind is going to, you have fight or flight instincts. And what Jesus did was show another option. The guards were coming for him, the Garden of Gethsemane. Peter cuts off one of the soldiers' ears and he puts the ear back on and heals it. And he says, "No, we're not fighting our way out of this. And he goes with it, And guess what? 2,000 years later, billions of people worship him and, recognize him as a leader and an inspiration. We don't do that with people who go and kill their way out of situations. There's a reason why and Gandhi or whatever, taking a pacifist stand is powerful. It's one of the reasons Jordan Peterson blew up to be an international figure that people respected, because when he was getting threatened, he just said, "No, I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to act like a jerk and go crazy, but I'm going to take a principled stand, and you're going to have to show the world what your cards are, what you're actually planning on doing if somebody just refuses." And I think there's a lot of value in that compared to just trying to run away and not be of any. You're not going to make a difference that way if you're hiding out somewhere, but you can make a difference if you're on the stand, so to speak. If you get brought up and you have to testify about what you believe or whatever. So I think there's some value there too. And on regards to the border crisis,
maybe just before I just want to add one thing before getting to Texas. What you reminded me about this sort of attitude, right? And I've thought about it regarding the police, the authorities here in Mexico, because I've heard stories from Mexicans where the transit police or even just the regular police will shake you down and stuff like this and try to intimidate you, or they got crazy rules here in Mexico where if you're speeding, you're supposed to get a speeding ticket, but sometimes the transit cop will say, "Hey, if you don't pay me a bribe, I'm going to impound your car." And you're like, "What do you mean? The rules say you're supposed to give me a speeding ticket. It's got nothing to do with impounding my car." It's like, "Well, I'm going to impound your car if you don't give me a bribe." This kind of stuff. And what I've heard from people is if you have this more pacifist stance, our initial reaction is like, we want to get angry and argue with the guy. You're a corrupt cop. And from all the people that I've spoken to that have gotten successfully out of these situations, you always want to go the peaceful route. You always sort of want to respect the person, kind of play dumb. I've had people say, for friends of mine that said, "Oh, I'm a Christian, I can't pay a bribe," and in the end, they just let him go. And so I think often that's a better way to react to some of these scenarios. But yeah, your thoughts on what is popping off in Texas?
Well, yeah, it's kind of an example of that. Like, these are peaceful people. Another convoy we're talking about here. The headline I saw was "War Tensions, Army of God Convoy Heads to Southern Border." This is just from yesterday. The war tensions are expanding. The Army of God convoys heading to the southern border as tensions elevate between Biden and Abbott, the Texas governor. And the organizers of the convoy, they call it "Take Our Border Back." say, we're calling all active and retired law enforcement and military, veterans, mama bears, elected officials, business owners, ranchers, truckers, bikers, media, and law-abiding, capital letters law-abiding, freedom-loving Americans to assemble in honor of our U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. So nothing here is calling for violence. This is not a threat, but you can guarantee that the media is going to cover it as a terrorist convoy that's going to come in and try to, threaten things and just, assuming since it's in Texas that it's going to be welcomed by Abbott, and they're not going to have the Canadian treatment where they get attacked and horses are trampling over old women and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just a sign of one of the ways people are trying to handle the crisis is to peacefully assemble, but call for, military veterans to go there, people who, might be open carrying guns and might be ready to defend themselves with force if necessary. So I'm definitely got my eye on what happens here, because again, the psychology, if you're scared of these types of people because you're part of the, whatever, you're some sort of Masonic conspirator here, or whatever the reality is behind it, or just CIA controlling the narco states and saying it's election year, send as many as you can, whatever's really going on here, they're not going to want to let this slide and let the media cover it as a heroic assembly of freedom lovers.
I wanted to get your thoughts maybe for a moment on comparing the U.S. trucker convoy to the Canadian trucker convoy so we had the Canadian trucker convoy during COVID 1984, and now we've got the American one during Civil War 2.0. And my impression is the one in Canada, that seemed to be organic. Like, I think that was real, authentic, organic. Maybe later in, the authorities always try to come in after the fact to infiltrate, hijack, destabilize. They send the Fed undercover RCMP with a Nazi poster or some silly stuff like that. But it's funny, memes immediately popped up. So that story you shared, Take Our Border Back Convoy, takeourborderback.com, and I saw that when it came out. But immediately on the telegrams, there's just a lot of funny memes. One of them is the classical FBI agent, wearing the FBI blue jacket with his suit and tie, and is off on his laptop with a gun next to the table, and it says, he's typing, "Let's have a peaceful assembly at the border. I'm a trucker just like you," and so it's we do have to think about that,
Yes.
and I think we have a little bit more leeway time now for the Texas situation where the feds could get there quickly. We saw what happened with J6, and so do you think they're
Right.
well? I think this is going to be a year of false flags. I interviewed J. Michael Waller on my podcast last week. He was in the CIA, and he's now saying that expect false flags this year and pushes to instigate civil war. Is that something you think we could be expecting?
I mean, I would be surprised if there wasn't an organic attempt. So whether this is that attempt or not, I don't know. But, Canada's convoy really did seem to move the needle. And so it would make sense if during other crises, there would be a convoy. In fact, there was one in Washington, I believe, wasn't it? There was a giant convoy that went down to Washington, I believe, but it was almost like a media blackout. Nobody covered it. It was actually like hundreds of semis or something that went there for a couple of days. And I remember seeing it and thinking it would be a huge event I don't know how long it was after the Canadian one, but it just didn't get any coverage. This one, if it gets more and more coverage and you start seeing it, exposed everywhere, that would almost suggest to me that it is a false flag. And then if things start going awry and there's all these like connections to whatever, some sort of extremist groups or whatever, you got to wait and see how they spin it. But absolutely, false flags are in the cards. And if you're thinking of going there as an independent journalist, if somebody listening to this is going there, like, watch for that, report on that, any suspicious things going on in the convoy. That would be awesome to have somebody inside there showing us, the Fed surrection sort of things going on.
And Texas barbecue. I sure miss the Texas barbecue that I had last year when I was there for the Ron Paul Conference and American Liberty Awards. If they have another Ron Paul Conference in Texas this year, I'll probably go and enjoy that Texas barbecue. And that segues into the next story. Meat, steak, barbecue. You found this story. They are relentless, Terry. This is Associated Press, or Associated Propaganda, as I might like to call it. Israeli company gets green light to make world's first cultivated beef steaks. And you look at the image, it looks absolutely disgusting. First steaks in the world made from cultivated beef cells, not the entire animal. The move follows approval of lab-grown chicken. And, as more time goes by, Terry, I just think, like, how insane all of this is. Like, it makes literally no sense from an economic, environmental perspective. It's just like it's total insanity. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that's a good start. I mean, I think if you're planning on destroying the ecosystem, destroying farms, and having people ultimately not know what they're even consuming, you can start with stuff like this, and there's not really any studies on the long-term health effects or anything. Of course, this is just insanity. The company is from the, it got a go-ahead by the Israeli Health Ministry, which I'm sure was behind all of their super aggressive Green Pass COVID mandates back during that. So, I wonder right there if you could trust them. The move was announced by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who called it a global breakthrough. I don't see any way in which this is a global breakthrough because it's already being done in several parts of the world. It's just, I guess they're trying to get it first onto market and actually sell the things. I think it should be illegal to call it a steak just by category. It's not a steak. It's slime. It's mush. It's disgusting slime cells that they grew in a lab in a petri dish. It says the beef will be grown from cells derived from a fertilized egg from a Black Angus cow named Lucy living on a California farm. So you've got some cross-country cooperation there. More than 150 companies in the world are pursuing the goal of creating cultivated or cell-cultured meat, also known as lab-grown meat. So it's a nightmare. I mean, this is Orwellian. You could put this in a George Orwell book, and it would fit right in. It would be a nightmare scenario that this is what people are thinking of eating. This is what governments are approving and pushing as a health alternative, much like the plant-based fake meat. It takes way more money and is super uneconomical to make this stuff. Animals just give birth to each other, and you can kill them at some point and then have meat. This requires teams of scientists to go and cultivate and put it all together. So it's environmentally and economically insane as well. It's not just disgusting.
And I think you hit the nail on the head again. I think we are witnessing the transition to soiling green. So, right now it says the final paragraph says cultivated meat is grown in, just imagine this cultivated meat is grown in large steel tanks using cells that come from a living animal, fertilized egg, or special bank of stored cells. The original cells are combined with special nutrients, like what's in there, to help them grow into masses or sheets of meat that are shaped into familiar foods such as cutlets or steak. And I think this is just like the first phase. Imagine, and they're using this opportunity now to develop all this technology, streamline it, and then look. I don't doubt that they're gonna like literally soiling green. That they'll start throwing people into the vats, and they'll basically transition us to become cannibals. We must stop this madness, and we must also go to our break. We'll be right back. Some stuff. And do check out his website, wolfpox.com, winterchristian.substack.com. You can buy his books and follow him on the socials. There's this story, Pope responds to African protests against gay blessings. Catholic bishops have rejected a recent Vatican declaration allowing an extra liturgical rite for same-sex couples. And I was mentioning this to some folks here in Mexico, where Mexico's, largely Catholic, and it's funny, they don't even know about this. They don't even know that the Pope blessed same-sex quote marriages, and people just don't have a clue. But what do you make of the Africa pushing back?
Well, to me, this is just sort of a logical resistance. The Catholic Church is obviously not a unified global, community. It's got a lot of dissensions within it, a lot of resistances. Pope Francis is very controversial, very liberal, very much about the green agenda and all these types of things. So just the conflict itself to me is not particularly fascinating, but I have been doing my own research into why this kind of stuff is happening. And one of the things that sort of unlocked my understanding of why Pope Francis is doing this is a book called In the Closet of the Vatican: Power, Homosexuality, and Hypocrisy. And it's actually a very interesting book because it's written by a gay Catholic guy who was a journalist who went right into the Vatican and developed all sorts of friendships and contacts with bishops and archbishops and priests and monks and all sorts of things there. Firsthand journalism, doing interviews. A lot of it is, anonymous to protect the identity of the people, but they were coming out of the closet. They were admitting that they were gay in the Vatican, and that it was basically a huge gay organization. I mean, it sounds like I'm mocking them or I'm making a joke, but the book is written from a sympathetic point of view, saying, if there wasn't such a stigma around this, these guys could just be open, and then you wouldn't, because they also have to weirdly be the most vocally anti-gay in order to shed any suspicions around them, and they want to keep it all hush hush. And so what Pope Francis is doing, and he even talks about this in the book, is he's trying to take the baby steps towards normalizing it so that there's not such internal strife and blackmail and conflicts within the Vatican. A couple of months ago, we talked about the orgy at the one secret party that was going on, where some male prostitute died of a heart attack, and they were trying to block the door so that the ambulance couldn't get to him because it was so incriminating, and weird stuff like this, that's going on behind the scenes there. And so theoretically, what Pope Francis is trying to do is to take away the stigma, normalize it, and say it's valid is his term, not that it's sanctioned and that it's equal to straight marriage, but it's valid and you can bless it. And then maybe, I guess, these guys could start to come out of the closet, and the Vatican could basically reveal itself to be a hive of unmarried, of course, because they're not allowed to be married to a woman. So, it attracts these gay men who go in there, and guess what? You're part of this system now that's totally set up, established. It's very old. And for that reason, this story just is like, you're seeing just the glimpses of this whole operation behind the scenes. And I don't know what Catholics make of it. I assume they would be horrified if they heard about any of this stuff. But, I'm not a Catholic. I certainly have deep resentment against the Catholic Church as a Mennonite, who they brutally murdered and tried to commit genocide on Mennonites, for hundreds of years already. So for me, this is just interesting to see the way that they're handling an internal crisis. And then you've got this pushback from the African community saying, don't go down this road.
Yeah, I want to play the woke game. So, hey, these are African, people, bishops protesting. Hey, we can't say that would be racist if we say anything. But here it says Catholic bishops in Central Asia, including Kazakhstan, have been pushing back, saying it's a contradiction of the church's longstanding practice and doctrine. And Pope Francis says those who protest vehemently belong to small ideological groups. And I'm just thinking, What? What are you talking about? He says a special case are Africans. For them, homosexuality is something bad from a cultural point of view. They don't tolerate. Mr. Pope Francis, my thing here is just like, look, why do you pretend? If you don't want to be a Catholic Christian anymore, then don't go do whatever it is you want to do, but don't try to merge the two worlds together or pervert Christianity. And there's a lot that can be said about Catholicism. I'm an ex-Catholic myself, but here's a quote from Corinthians 1:6-8. It says, "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God?" So this is from the Bible that the Pope is supposed to represent. Right? He's a representative supposedly of Christ on earth. And the Bible says, the righteous will not inherit the kingdom of God. Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral. And in that I would include people having relations that are not married, even straight people, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, swindlers. They will not inherit the kingdom of God. So it's just like right there, Terry, it's just clear as day, and I don't know what this guy is doing. And so, any other thoughts on that, or we can we got a couple minutes left as well to discuss what's happening in Israel.
Well, my thoughts on that is that I think that in the coming Green World Order, if they want to have, if the Catholic Church wants to rebrand itself as being the leader of the progressive movement, they're going to have to take major steps this way. And it's going to be interesting to see if there isn't almost a civil war within the Catholic Church as they have to change their identity and try to shed off all the traditionalists and all the conservatives who, exactly like you just said, would care about what the Bible says instead of just trying to be popular with liberal crowds. So that this could become much bigger if they actually get serious about that. But yes, let's talk about Israel. It's got this convention, a convention which I don't know what it all covered, but it definitely covered Gaza and the war. And you had all these people coming up on stage. It's basically tried to like a rally sort of thing. And a lot of Israeli ministers from the government were there, and they were dancing and they were celebrating what's going on in Gaza. And they were saying, the only way to secure Gaza and to prevent conflict is to occupy it themselves and settle it and turn. They had maps of Gaza broken up into new towns with Hebrew names that, would be new cities or new towns for Israel. So it's just complete replacement of the population, drive them out, kill them, whatever happens, rebuild it, build back better, and this is shocking a lot of people because it's showing that while they're literally being taken to the International Court of Justice for genocide, and the court actually did say that they have to do more, that there is a potential genocide happening. Meanwhile, they're celebrating and saying, yippee, we're going to drive these people out and then we're going to occupy it ourselves. So it's kind of, tipping their hand, at least for these ministers who joined. And I don't see anybody at the high level denouncing them or saying that they reject this attitude. So it's kind of shocking to see it in this climate with so little support from the international community. They're just doubling down on it, it seems like.
It's, very in your face. I think if any other country was to do something like this, there'd be, more hubbub about it. But, we did see what happened with Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenia. They just, they expelled the people, and that was it. And so, yeah, I guess we're just going to have to see what we are going to find out what's going to happen. Tough times, Terry. You'll be back with us in a couple days, but again, we're less than 1 minute to midnight. Tell us again where people can go to find your stuff and how to support you.
Yeah, go to winterchristian.substack.com. I do have paid options there. There's some people who are supporting me there. That's wonderful. And wolfpox.com has links directly to my books. If people are interested in my books on prophecy and all these things, it's all at wolfpox.com.
All right. Have a wonderful week. We'll talk again soon. I've got Stuart J. Hooper coming up, hour 2. Be right back.